people of the internet, I decided to go ahead and start myself off another little mini-series on this YouTube channel where I check out some of the cheapest different firearms that I have in my arsenal. They won't necessarily be the cheapest that exist, but they're going to be the cheapest as to the ones that I've managed to find, and they're probably going to correspond with some of the cheapest ones that exist. I am very confident in saying that this right here is probably the cheapest little handgun in the world. This right here is likely the cheapest gun in the world. A lot of times you can find these at like pawn stores and whatnot, but I don't think I've ever seen one for sale in an actual gun store. Anytime you buy one of these, 9 times out of 10, the seller is going to say, hey, this is for display purposes only. Don't actually go out and shoot it, but a lot of people, like myself, go out and shoot them anyway. So this right here is a ROM. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. That's how other people I've heard pronounce it. ROM, RHOM. That is the name of the company, and this right here is the RG20. I've seen reviews on the RG10s. This is the RG20. I do not know what the difference between the two is, but I picked up this right here at a pawn store a couple of years back for $7. These right here, very, very, very commonly you can find these for sale for like under 50 bucks. Typically the price point ranges around 30 bucks or so. They are extremely poor quality little handguns. A lot of times they are exceptionally unreliable, but with this one right here, I've gotten exceptional reliability with it. Don't ask me why this one's so reliable, but I think like out of every 100 rounds I fire out of this thing, I've probably gotten 1 or 2 malfunctions, and that is incredibly rare with these things. Normally about half the cylinder is duds with this thing because the springs in the hammer just don't have the oomph necessary to really crimp down on those 22 shorts that this thing fires. This is not chambered in 22 long or 22 long rifle. It is strictly 22 short, but for 35 bucks, this is not, or 35 bucks commonly, this is not a bad thing to go with, especially if you literally have nothing else. I would take one of these over, you know, some angry words and some fist shaking any day of the week. Now, like I said, I picked this up for $7, and of course, the seller said, hey, display purposes only, don't actually go out and try and shoot this thing, but I've ran a bunch of rounds through it so far. It's still holding up. I've got, I don't know, 1,000 rounds or so through this thing. 22 short is not a particularly meaty, beefy round, so it's not a particularly high pressure. This thing right here is more than adequate of handling it. I've seen some pretty intense Saturday night specials in my time, but there's not very many Saturday night special revolvers out there just because semi-automatics are so easy and cheap to make, especially when you get yourself the ones just made out of like cheap pot cast metal. This right here is a revolver that was made by a company based out of Germany, though from what I've been told, apparently they also had some kind of facility over here in Miami, Florida. I do not know if it was a factory where they produced the ammunition or just an import area where they brought these in. These are made commonly in the 50s and 60s. The company that made them went out of business in the 80s. They are, for all intents and purposes, a Saturday night special handgun. You typically, if you are up to some nefarious purposes, you'll pick up one of these, you'll use it to handle whatever business it is that you're wanting to handle, and then since it was a dirt cheap handgun, you basically just throw it away. Now, as far as the ergonomics go, they are not great. Your modern style actual revolvers out there, not to say this isn't an actual revolver, it is a revolver, but your actual revolvers out there are going to be way more ergonomically superior to something like this. To open up your cylinder, there's a little, what would you call this, little pull tab up here that unlocks the cylinder and allows you to rotate it out. Besides that, this is both single action and double action, which I am wholeheartedly surprised at for a gun of this price point. It does have a transfer bar in it, which I am also wholeheartedly surprised about. Normally with, you know, low end firearms like this, they have very, very little in terms of safety mechanisms, but this does actually have a transfer bar, and it does actually work. The hammer will not hit the firing pin if that trigger is not being pulled, and that will prevent the gun from going off. Let's say if you were to smack your hammer in the back, a lot of times if you don't have a transfer bar, then that hammer will just hit the firing pin and drive that into the primer of the cartridge and set the gun off. But the transfer bar is like a little block of metal that is in between those two and actually acts as a transfer bar. It transfers force from the hammer into the firing pin and sets it off. But that is not in place if the trigger is not being pulled. Sights on this thing are absolutely mediocre at best, but they are way better than some sights on other handguns that I've seen. It's very literally just a fixed front post and a rear sight that is just a notch kind of crudely cut into the back of the frame. Besides that, 6-round capacity of 22 shorts. It's a heavy gun for what it is, but it's an exceptionally inexpensive gun. If you had 50 bucks, you could get yourself one of these and like a box of 50 rounds for it, and that would be a hell of a lot better than being completely unarmed. I'm going to go ahead and say that right now. However, I'm going to go ahead and point out that you do not want this as a primary defensive weapon. This right here is one of those things that you have if you have literally nothing else. In my particular case, like I said, I picked this up at a pawn store. It was $7. I thought it was cool. It's definitely a pretty piece between the black finish on the actual frame, barrel, etc., the firearm, the actual metalwork of the firearm, and this, although it is plastic, this white grip over here on the revolver itself. It's got a very, what would I call it? A very aesthetically pleasing look to it. Until you start, you know, actually handling it, and this thing just literally, it feels like an incredibly cheap gun. Cylinder timing, not great, but not bad. Not bad for a $7 handgun. There's a lot of perks with something like this. 6 rounds, it does have an auto ejector in it, so, well, I say auto ejector. It does have an ejector in it, so you can knock out your cases pretty quickly. You could load this thing and fire it pretty effectively. I do not know why this one is so reliable, and yet some of the other ones I've seen are exceptionally unreliable. But this one right here is, I guess I just got lucky with it. Every now and then you get a lemon, every now and then you get not a lemon. Maybe the spring in this hammer was like, maybe somebody took it out, stretched it a bit, gave it a little bit more tension before I bought it. I'm not entirely sure, but I think this right here is a fantastic little handgun to go ahead and start off this whole debacle behind what it is that I'm going to be doing. I want to make a little series where I review some of the cheapest firearms that I have, and I'm going to go ahead and like start off with the absolute budget bargain barrel firearms that I have. And thinking like, I don't know, 10 years ago, that barrel was much, much fuller. But I still have quite a few very cheap, not necessarily all that effective firearms, but very cheap firearms, and that's going to be very interesting for this series. So thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe to the channel. I think I've given pretty much all the background that I can on this little handgun. It's 22 shorts, 6 rounds, very, very cheap little handgun, not always reliable for obvious reasons. Probably a reason why they're so cheap. They always tell you it's for display purposes only. That tells me there's a lot of safety features or safety issues with these guns. Like I said before, I've only seen real significant reviews on the RG10. This is an RG20, so maybe there were some upgrades, and maybe this right here is just a little bit more effective. I do not know. I was not able to find a whole lot of information on this firearm, but I'm sure a lot of people out there are going to tell me plenty. So obviously not very effective, especially at the ranges I was shooting this thing at, but it's also not very powerful considering that it's 22 short, but hey, $7 handgun, and then like you get yourself a box of 50 for like 10 bucks, you know, less than $20, and you have yourself a handgun. Alright, well folks, like I said, subscribe to the channel, like the video if you like the video. That helps out with the algorithm. Description down below has a link to all sorts of different stuff. Go ahead and go check that out. I'm going to go make another video because I have quite a few cheap little firearms that I'm going to be checking out. You guys go off, have yourself a fantastic day, and of course, thanks for watching. Since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. Poor man's Garen. shame that bolt action shotguns aren't more mainstream.